Welcome to the Veil of Truth, your passport to the stories that matter, globe showing Europe, Africa. I'm thrilled you're here. Let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from around the world. Chapter 1, An Unsettling Invitation. The morning mist curled like a silvery ribbon through the pines that lined the winding drive to Ashcroft Manor. Gentle rays of dawn struggled through low-hanging clouds, lending the vast estate an ethereal, almost otherworldly glow. Hercule Poirot stepped briskly from his motorcar, his perfectly rounded bowler hat set at a rakish angle and his black patent shoes clicking crisply upon the gravel. He inhaled deeply, allowing the chill air to invigorate his little grey cells. There was something about the manner in which the mist dissipated around the turrets of the manor that suggested more than mere weather. It hinted at hidden intricacies, veiled intentions, secrets lying dormant until coaxed into daylight. Poirot carried a slim envelope in his gloved hand. The stationery bore a fine watermark and Lady Helena Ashcroft's elegant monogram, an intertwine H and A in pale lavender. He had received it 2 days earlier, requesting his immediate presence and utmost discretion at the unveiling of a newly acquired pastel by George's Surrett, followed by a private disclosure of equally delicate nature. The detective's moustaches twitched in delighted anticipation. He possessed the unshakable conviction that no human fear, folly, or cunning lay beyond the reach of his methodical intellect. Passing beneath a stone arch adorned with climbing ivy, Poirot entered the great oak door of Ashcroft Manor. The interior was a harmonious blend of Tudor grandeur and modern refinement, tapestried walls depicting hunting scenes from a bygone age, polished floorboards that gleamed with the care of devoted housekeepers, and vast bay windows overlooking terraced gardens. A hush greeted him, broken only by the soft rustle of silken drapes and the distant chirrup of startled birds. He bowed lightly to the butler, Mr. Carlyle, a tall, lean man with an expression as inscrutable as polished ebony. Carlyle inclined his head and silently indicated the drawing-room beyond. Through the heavy doors, Poirot found Lady Helena reclining upon an ivory chaise longue, her gown of pale mauve shimmering like moonlight upon satin. Though she attempted a warm smile, there was tension beneath her measured composure, fine lines around her temples, the faintest tremor in her fingers. 3 others occupied the room. Dr. Edmund Chambers, the family physician, stood by the fireplace, his medical bag at his feet. He cast anxious glances towards his patient. Thomas Reed, a recent protégé of Lady Helena's patronage and a young impressionist of burgeoning renown, fiddled with the thick wooden frame that contained the pastel, his cheeks flushed with a mixture of pride and apprehension. Finally, Miss Clara Bell, Lady Helena's devoted maid of many years, hovered discreetly in the corner, her posture rigid, her dark eyes reflecting concern that went beyond mere duty. Lady Helena raised a gloved hand and beckoned Poirot to her side. "Thank you for coming so promptly, Monsieur Poirot," she murmured, her voice like silk fraying at the edges. "There is, how shall I say it, an urgency to what I have to show you." She paused, as though seeking courage, and then directed the assembled party's attention to a covered easel. Reed stepped forward and with ceremonious flourish drew back the cloth. The pastel, rendered in luminous dots of cerulean and honeygold, depicted a solitary canal in Venice at sunset. Its beauty was arresting, and for a moment the group fell silent, lost in its gentle magic. Then, without warning, Lady Helena clutched at her throat and crumpled. A soft cry escaped her lips as she sank sideways, her delicate frame sprawling upon the chaise. Miss Bell gasped and hurried forward. Dr. Chambers leapt across the room. Poirot, with startling swiftness, was at Lady Helena's side, sliding to his knees and checking her pulse. "She is alive," he announced in calm, even tones. Yet in a state of profound unconsciousness. He lifted her wrist and noted its racing flutter, as though her heart pounded in fear rather than distress. "Mais ouï, this is no simple faint." As servants bustled in, carrying smelling salts and bottles of aromatic oils, Poirot straightened and surveyed the chaotic tableau with a practiced eye. The reflection of the ornate chandelier danced upon the parquet floor, where he noticed, almost too faint to discern, a pale purple dusting on the lacquered surface of a sideboard. He made a mental note of it. To his right, a porcelain teacup lay toppled, its saucer unbroken but bearing an almost invisible stain. At the very edge of the rug was a tiny shard of glass, jagged and betraying pressure that had snapped the protective case front. Poirot delicately adjusted his cravat, ordered the servants to leave Lady Helena in Dr. Chambers's care, and requested that no one be admitted or allowed to depart. As the room emptied, save for Lady Helena's confidants and himself, he flicked open a handcrafted leather notebook and dipped his fountain pen. The hush returned, so complete that he could hear the faintest rasp of fabric as Reed swallowed nervously and Miss Bell's quiet sobbing. "Let us begin," Poirot declared softly. "Mon Dieu, we have before us three distinct happenings, the collapse of Lady Helena, the presence of this curious violet powder, and the fractured glass shard. Permit me to examine them in turn." He bent to inspect the teacup, his monocle enhancing the curve of his eye. "Note the residue here," he said, pointing to a barely perceptible smear upon the rim. "It is not the usual lavender essence Miss Bell employs for her mistress's teas." He looked up at Bell. "Madam, pray tell me what you brewed this morning." Clara Bell swallowed, her gloved hands twisting in her lap. "Earl Grey, monsieur." "Only the finest," she stammered. Lady Helena requested her special blend." She trailed off, eyes darting to Reed, then to Chambers. Dr. Chambers interjected smoothly. "I saw nothing untoward, Poirot. Miss Bell's teas are beyond reproach, save for her mistress's sudden indisposition." He gestured to his empty medical bag. "I shall attend to Lady Helena in the adjacent chamber." Poirot gave a small nod. "Thank you, Doctor. Thomas, did you handle the pastel case yourself?" Reed's pale brow furrowed. "Yes, Monsieur Poirot, but only to draw back the cloth. The frame and glass were intact when I lifted the cover." Poirot rose and approached the shattered fragment with gloved fingers, careful not to disturb any latent trace evidence. "Curious," he murmured. "The break is fresh, and yet the shard bears no fingerprints. Someone wielded a tool, or wore gloves." He straightened and smoothed his immaculate jacket. "We shall speak presently, but for now, I ask that you remain here. Any movement or speech may disturb clues too subtle for even the keenest ear to detect." He then retreated to the hearth, where he stared thoughtfully into the dying embers of a smoldering log, as though searching within the pattern of drifting ash for answers. Moments passed in reverent silence. The hush was broken only by Poirot's soft voice, barely above a whisper, as he spoke to himself. One questioned a psychology, who among them had reason to see Lady Helena fall, and the pastel removed. The violet dust, false lead or true? The shattered glass, accident or design? He tapped his temple lightly. The game is afoot. With that, he withdrew his notebook and, returning to the group, prepared to begin his methodical inquiry. The morning's light brightened beyond the tall windows, but inside Ashcroft Manor, shadowy secrets awaited illumination, and Monsieur Poirot was resolved to bring them all to light. Chapter 2, A Methodical Inspection. The morning after Lady Helena's collapse dawned clear and bright, yet a pall of tension still clung to Ashcroft Manor. Poirot, impeccably dressed despite the hour, proceeded to the drawing-room with deliberate calm. He moved slowly around the scene of the previous day's commotion, pausing to inspect each detail with his little grey cells fully alert. The violet powder on the sideboard, now carefully preserved under glassine, caught the dawn light as though it might speak. The jagged shard of glass lay exactly where he had left it, a silent sentinel to mischief. Poirot noted its acute angle, noting that it must have been broken deliberately, not through accident. Inviting Dr. Edmund Chambers to join him by the fire, Poirot observed the physician's manner. Chambers stood with his back rigid, hands clasped behind him, and eyes that flicked too rapidly toward the corridor. "Doctor," Poirot began softly, "kindly recount for me the precise moments after Lady Helena fell." The doctor described how he had rushed forward, supported her petite frame, and applied smelling salts. Poirot nodded thoughtfully as Chambers spoke of lavender essence and faint rasping breaths. Then, with gentle firmness, Poirot inquired about the doctor's gloves. Chambers hesitated. His gloves had vanished that morning, he confessed, replaced by a fresh pair lent by the housekeeper after he spilled ink on his own. Poirot filed away that omission as most curious. Next, Poirot summoned Thomas Reed to his side. The young artist, still shaken, wrung his hands and avoided direct gaze. "Monsieur Reed," said Poirot, "you handled the pastel's frame yourself. Tell me exactly where you stood when the lady collapsed." Reed admitted he had stepped back to admire the canvas, caught by the swirl of color. Poirot's eyes narrowed. He drew a diagram in his notebook, marking Reed's footprint by the easel. "And this fragment," continued Poirot, indicating the shard, "fell from the glass that you yourself touched? Or was it there before?" Reed stammered that the frame seemed intact when he removed the cloth, yet his smock bore a near-invisible fleck of violet powder on the cuff. The young man's distress was genuine, but his careless smock betrayed either clumsiness or concealment. Miss Clarabelle was the last to be questioned. She entered the room with a measured curtsy, her demeanor composed, yet Poirot detected the slightest quiver in her voice. "Madame Belle," he began gently, "you know your mistress's habits well. Have you ever observed her tea rituals disturbed?" Belle shook her head, insisting that Lady Helena's routine was precise, lavender-scented water at precisely 4 o'clock, no variation. Poirot produced a small vial of the violet powder. "Will you please smell this?" he asked. Belle inhaled carefully, then recoiled slightly. "That is not the lavender I use. It has a bitter undertone." Poirot allowed a faint smile to play on his lips. "Exactment. A clue, perhaps, that our villain sought to mimic familiarity while masking a darker intent." Having gathered these testimonies, Poirot turned to the physical evidence. He produced a magnifying glass and inspected the violet granules. Their hue was deeper and more uniform than the natural lavender crystals in Lady Helena's pantry. "This is not botanical," he mused. "It is chemically synthesized. Someone with knowledge of compounds, one might surmise a chemist or a well-informed apothecary, could have prepared it." He tapped the glass shard as well. "Note the clean break here and the lack of striations on the reverse." The case was opened forcibly but carefully, suggesting a steady hand. He looked round at his small audience. "We are dealing with precision, as with the poison that felled Lady Helena." Poirot paused to collect his thoughts before proceeding to the overturned tea tray. The fine porcelain teacup lay on its side, its delicate gold rim unscathed but bearing a faint smear of the same violet powder inside. He dabbed a corner of his silk handkerchief and carried the sample to Dr. Chambers for a quick field test. The doctor hesitated. Poirot needed no lab license when subtle color changes spoke volumes. Chambers applied a reagent that turned the powder a dull gray, indicating the presence of atropine alkaloids. "A mild soporific," Poirot announced, "enough to weaken but not to kill." "Ingenious." He returned the vial to his jacket pocket. The villain wished only to incapacitate Lady Helena, without permanent harm, at least at first. Drawing the suspects together, Poirot turned to psychological acuity. He began with Reed, presenting the young man with a hypothetical scenario of artistic envy leading to desperate measures. Reed's stormy reaction, a reddening of the cheeks and quick denial, suggested genuine distress rather than rehearsed calm. By contrast, Dr. Chambers received a moral rebuke about abusing medical knowledge, yet remained externally serene. Miss Bell, however, displayed a twitch of the mouth and a momentary averting of the eyes. Each reaction was a brushstroke on Poirot's mental canvas, some revealing and others concealing the truth. To deepen his understanding of motive, Poirot reviewed the relationships between Lady Helena and her confidants. He instructed Miss Bell to fetch the family ledger, ostensibly to confirm a minor detail. When Bell returned, she carried not only the ledger but also a second, smaller notebook that caught Poirot's eye. He casually noted its ribbon bookmark at a page with entries in Lady Helena's handwriting. A private journal, he surmised. "Madam Bell, do you know of this volume?" Bell's hands trembled as she replied that she had never seen it before, yet the crease in her apron pocket suggested familiarity. Poirot tucked his notebook away, confident that the maid's knowledge of secrets was deeper than she admitted. Having amassed these observations, Poirot assembled everyone in the drawing room once more. With elegant precision, he recounted each clue: the synthetic violet powder, the glass shard's clean break, the subtle atropine residue, and the contradictory testimonies. He highlighted the missing gloves of the doctor, the fleck on Reed's smock, and the maid's secret familiarity with the private journal. "My friends," he concluded, "we see that opportunity, means, and motive are interwoven in this tapestry of deception. But the pattern is not yet complete." He rose, smoothing his immaculate waistcoat. "I shall retire briefly to consult my notes and consider the next steps. I ask that none of you leave the estate until further notice." As he departed down the corridor, his polished shoes scarcely whispered on the carpet, the three suspects exchanged uneasy glances. Outside, the gardener carried trays of breakfast fruit to the servants' quarters, oblivious to the storm gathering within the manor's elegant walls. Unknown to them all, Poirot's methodical inspection had laid a foundation upon which the entire mystery would ultimately rest, and from which no miscreant could escape. Chapter 3: The Missing Pastel. At the first hint of dawn, a tense hush lay over Ashcroft Manor. Hercule Poirot, who favored a dignified morning routine, was disturbed by a gentle rap at his chamber door. The butler, Mr. Carlyle, stood waiting, face pale under the lamplight. "Monsieur Poirot," he whispered, "with deepest regret I must inform you the syrup pastel has disappeared." Poirot's small, neat moustaches quivered in surprise. He slipped into his morning coat and followed Carlyle down silent corridors, each step echoing on polished oak floors. Outside, the pale light of day revealed hedges glistening with dew. Inside, the drawing-room windows lay darkened, as though concealing a crime. With a discreet nod, Carlyle pushed open the heavy doors, and Poirot beheld only an empty frame where yesterday's masterpiece had hung. The gilt-edged case stood ajar upon its mahogany plinth, the glass front shattered in a single, precise arc. No one had disturbed the lock, it remained latched, its key still in Carlyle's custody. Scattered on the floor were but two clues, a lone shard of glass, its edges cleanly cut, and a mere whisper of violet-colored dust upon the velvet cushion. Poirot crouched, hands gloved, and examined the powder through his monocle. "Synthetic," he murmured. "Not the lavender of Miss Bell's sachets." He placed the glass fragment in a small evidence packet. Every detail mattered: the angled break, the absence of fingerprints, the residue of dust. Such precision bespoke a culprit both careful and knowledgeable. Summoning the household, Poirot first addressed Mr. Carlyle by the tall windows. The butler recounted his evening duties with mechanical calm. At precisely 10, he had sealed the drawing room after Lady Helena's retreat. Not another soul passed through until morning, when Carlyle discovered the pastels vanishing. No sounds, no footfalls, he insisted, voice clipped. The door unbroken, the lock intact. Yet Poirot detected a hesitancy as Carlyle spoke of securing windows that overlooked the terrace, windows which, conveniently, were latched from within. A sly question revealed that Carlyle had borrowed the key that morning from his own keybox, rather than use the master set. Why adjust his routine? Thomas Reed arrived next, paint smudges still on his fingers, his expression a mixture of guilt and indignation. "Monsieur Poirot," he began, "I swear on my honor the pastel was safe when I left last night." Reed explained he had remained in his studio until nearly midnight, preparing canvases for a forthcoming exhibition. No footsteps crept upon his ear, the hush was absolute. Poirot noted the faintest fleck of violet powder on Reed's cuff, near the wrist where the artist's smock frayed from use. "Explained is," said Poirot softly. Reed's eyes flickered. He claimed it came from a lavender pouch he carried to mask the smell of paint. Yet why would an artist carry such a sachet into his studio? Dr. Edmund Chambers was summoned from Lady Helena's bedside. The physician's gloves were missing, an omission he confessed with mild embarrassment. "I soiled them with ink while reviewing prescriptions for Lady Helena's convalescence," he said, and replaced them with a fresh pair before attending to her needs. Poirot observed the new gloves bore no trace of powder, but the discarded pair remained unaccounted for. Chambers professed he had not entered the drawing room after 10 o'clock. His schedule, Poirot noted, afforded him ample opportunity. He was free until his dawn rounds in the east wing. Was that window latch within his reach? Finally, Miss Clara Bell, Lady Helena's devoted maid, was questioned. She appeared composed, yet her cheeks were stained with tears. "Oh, monsieur, I cannot believe it," she exclaimed. She insisted she had tidied the room at 6:30, dusted the shelves, and replenished the blossoms in the silver vase. No curious sound disturbed her routine. Poirot produced a small card, slipped from the pastel's backing. On it was scrawled a single word, "Tonight." Belle gasped, I know nothing of this." Yet Poirot's glance caught the nobly arching curve of her left eyebrow twitching ever so slightly. And in her apron pocket's crease lay the faint outline of a folded scrap, which she hastily withdrew before he could see its contents. With each testimony, Poirot's brow furrowed in concentration. The theft bore the hallmarks of a carefully orchestrated plan, an incapacitated victim the night before, a concealed key, a shredded note, and an empty frame. He paced the room, recalling Lady Helena's letter, which hinted at confidential papers hidden behind the pastel. Perhaps the thief sought those documents more than the artwork itself. Yet the methodical application of violet dust to misdirect suspicion spoke of cunning beyond mere larceny. Poirot instructed Carlyle to search the gardens and outbuildings. Within the old tool shed, the gardener found a single fold of pastel back paper, crumpled and torn. No sign of the artwork remained. Elsewhere, a set of footprints led from the drawing-room window toward the rose arbor, large-soled boots bearing a distinctive tread. Poirot fetched a garden boot from the scullery. Its tread mismatched the print. He noted the soles of his own leather shoes were too small, and Reed's boots were likewise unmarked. Only one person in the house wore shoes that matched, a detail he committed to memory. That evening, Poirot assembled the household once more. Lady Helena, still pale but alert, sat draped in silk and asked in a quavering voice, "Have you found my pastel?" Poirot allowed a gentle smile before replying, "Not yet, madam, but the game grows ever more interesting." He held aloft the violet-stained sketch card. This misdirection suggests that our villain hoped to distract us with poison, while the true prize lay concealed behind the frame. A hush fell. Each of you had access, opportunity, and motive, or so it would appear. But although the theft and Lady Helena's collapse are intertwined, the path to truth remains obscure. With that, Poirot retired once more to his study, candlelight flickering upon his keen profile. Outside, servants whispered of the vanished Pastel. Within, the detective's mind hummed. Red herrings abounded like shifting patterns in a tapestry, yet Poirot sensed the threads would soon converge. The missing Pastel was more than mere theft, it was the keystone of a puzzle that he was determined to solve. And as the manor settled into uneasy silence, his little grey cells braced for the revelations to come. Chapter 4, Motives Unveiled. The grand library of Ashcroft Manor was hushed beneath heavy drapes, the afternoon light filtered through rain-spattered windows. A fire crackled in the hearth, casting flickering shadows upon rows of leather-bound volumes. Hercule Poirot, standing with impeccable poise before the marble mantel, cleared his throat. He had summoned the principal players, not to accuse, but to listen. "Mesdames et messieurs," he said, "it is time we explore that most vital strand of any crime, motive. Pray, share with us why each of you might wish for Lady Helena's embarrassment, or for the removal of the surrogate Pastel which concealed secrets." A brittle silence followed, broken first by Thomas Reed, whose young face retained the flush of indignation he had worn since morning. He rose, smoothing the lapels of his painter's smock. "Monsieur Poirot," he began, voice steady but edged with emotion, "I owe much to Lady Helena's generosity. Without her patronage, I would remain unknown, a mere student with dreams bigger than my talent. Of late I have found it harder still, canvases unsold, creditors at my door. I confess he stopped, swallowed hard, and continued more quietly, I approached Lady Helena 2 weeks ago for further support. I begged for funds to complete my grand project, only to be refused. She said my work lacked the depth she sought. Depth? As though art were measured by social standing rather than soul. It wounded me. I admit, I rued her refusal, but steal her precious Pastel? Never. Reed sank back into his chair, fingers clutching the arms as though seeking anchor. Dr. Edmund Chambers shifted in his seat, eyebrows knitting together. My motive, Poirot, is scarcely as dire as Mr. Reed's, he stated with forced calm. I have served Lady Helena faithfully for many years. Recently, she confided to me that she feared a family curse, an inherited heart ailment that might strike at any moment. She bade me keep this secret, to falsify medical records should anyone inquire. My conscience protested, yet I obeyed. To protect her reputation, I falsified bills and inventories, diverting clinic funds to pay for discreet treatment. If my actions were exposed, if anyone learned of this deception, I should lose my medical license, and worse, her trust. Yes, I had reason to fear her displeasure. He paused, glancing at the physician's bag at his feet. But to incapacitate her, to steal the Pastel, no, that I did not. Miss Clara Bell sat near the bookcases, her hands folded neatly in her lap, her posture rigid. She spoke so softly that Poirot leaned forward to catch her words. Sir, I owe my livelihood to Lady Helena. I have been her maid these 15 years. Yet the truth is this, my only brother, Captain Julian Bell, was serving abroad when a telegram arrived, accusing him of negligence in the field. Madame Helena, influential as she is, saw to it that his commission was withdrawn. He came home disgraced, forced to leave the army. Bell's voice trembled. I begged Lady Helena to revisit the matter, there must have been a mistake. But she remained unmoved. And when she acquired this Pastel, she hinted at documents concealed behind it, documents which, she implied, would settle the question of my brother's honor. If she refused to produce them, his name would remain tarnished. So yes, sir, I nursed resentment. But to poison her? to rob her artwork. I would sooner lose my own life. Lady Helena herself listened in silence, wrapped in a silk shawl, her expression inscrutable. Poirot allowed her no comment. Hers would come later, should the moment arrive. Instead, he turned to Carlyle, the butler, now standing respectfully to one side. "Mr. Carlyle," he said, "you oversee the comings and goings of Ashcroft Manor's staff. You know of all who might harbor grievance against your mistress. Is there among your household any other who stood to gain by her disgrace or by the removal of that pastel?" Carlyle's jaw tightened. "None, monsieur, save those you have mentioned. The servants loved her, for she was kind in her own way. And the gardener, Mr. Hill, is as loyal as any man could be. If I may say, I cannot fathom why any among us would commit such acts." Poirot nodded, then paused to study the expressions before him. He tapped his cane lightly upon the parquet floor. "You have all confessed, in part, your reasons for discontent. Yet motive alone does not suffice. We must consider also means and opportunity." He turned to Reed. "You spoke of creditors and refusal of patronage. But why, then, did you borrow gloves from Sir Berkeley's valet on the night of the unveiling? You wore them when handling the pastel frame." Reed's face paled. I spilled oil paints on mine," he stuttered. "I had no choice." Poirot's eyebrow lifted. "Curious that the glove's palm bore no trace of violet residue, whereas your smock cuff did. To Dr. Chambers he said, you swore your gloves were replaced after your ink spill. Yet no one saw you exit the surgery after 10 o'clock, and those fresh gloves vanished entirely." The doctor's well-practiced composure flickered, though his voice did not. "I wore them in the servants' passage, to avoid soiling my own. Then I left them behind in my haste when Lady Helena fainted." Poirot made a small note. "Miss Bell received the most gentle of interrogations. You claim never to have handled the private journal you so fervently denied knowing. Yet the crease upon its cover matches the fold of your apron pocket." Bell's lips trembled, she cast down her eyes. I wished only to see if Lady Helena would relent." Beyond these whispered exchanges, Poirot examined his notebook once more. He had sketched the room's layout, the position of the easel, the fireplace, the sofa, each numbered footstep and discarded teacup. A half-erased calculation caught his attention, 17.421. He had jotted it beside the mantel. These numbers, Madam and Messrs, were found scribbled upon the back of Lady Helena's ledger, in her own handwriting. He produced the ledger. Yet they do not correspond to any date or time. Could they be coordinates? A code? Or yet another false lead? At that moment, the gardener, Mr. Hill, appeared at the door. He handed Poirot a scrap of paper, a hastily torn corner of the suret pastel's backing, discovered lodged in the wrought iron railing of the terrace. Upon it was scrawled a single word, vendredi, the French for Friday. It was scrawled in trembling hand, the ink half smudged by rain. "The note suggests a rendezvous," Poirot announced, "or perhaps the date of departure for the artwork. Yet Friday was 2 days ago, before the unveiling. Did our thief plan in advance?" As the suspects exchanged uneasy glances, Poirot allowed a moment of silence to settle. Then he spoke. "We see now that each of you possessed sufficient motive, artistic ambition, professional fear, familial loyalty. But motive without opportunity is impotent. An opportunity without method is chaotic. The theft and the feint were executed with precision. The violet powder, the broken glass, the missing gloves, each detail was calculated. Whoever orchestrated this knew both Lady Helena's routines and the layout of this house as only an insider might." He swept his gaze across them. "We are not yet at our conclusion," but the tapestry of suspicion is woven ever tighter. I shall retire to ponder these revelations." With that, Poirot bowed and withdrew into the corridor, his silhouette framed by the rain-streaked window. In the library, the four suspects remained, each lost in troubled thought. Outside, the storm gathered anew, as though echoing the tumult within Ashcroft Manor. And within Poirot's mind, the wheels of deduction turned inexorably toward the truth. Chapter 5, The Tailor's Tag. Late that night, when the moon cast pale silver upon the dew-heavy lawns of Ashcroft Manor, Poirot slipped quietly through the corridors, his keen mind restless. An intuition had taken hold of him. The greenhouse, with its lush foliage and glass roof, might harbor a clue overlooked by others. No servant dared disturb him, so he found the doors unlocked and pushed through into a tropical hush. The air was warm and fragrant with jasmine and greenhouse orchids, a stark contrast to the chill stone of the house. Yet here, among the exotic blooms, he detected the faintest dusting of violet powder settled upon the leaves of a camellia. Poirot stooped, fingers gloved, and with his monocle inspected the powder's uniform granules. "Synthetic, bien sûr," he murmured. As he studied the cluster, his gaze fell upon a single leather glove half hidden beneath a fern. It was a glove of the finest calfskin, soft, supple, and elegant, but conspicuously stained with the same lavender-hued dust. He retrieved it with care and turned it over in the lantern light. Stamped in gold upon the inner lining was a name, Marcel Duval, Savile Row. Such a label bespoke craftsmanship, hardly the sort of glove owned by a humble maid or a medical man. With the glove safely pocketed, Poirot examined the greenhouse more thoroughly. He noticed footprints in the soil, broad-soled boots, not small enough for Clara Bell or Mr. Reed. The prints led toward a narrow service door at the back, one seldom used except by Mr. Carlyle, the butler. Yet Poirot knew Carlyle wore polished shoes for his duties, not sturdy boots. Whoever had entered here had come prepared to forage in obscurity. He stooped near the door and observed a faint scuff on the threshold, as though the boot's sole had caught on the wood, leaving a telltale mark. Returning to the manor's interior, Poirot retired to his study, where the glove lay upon his desk like a silent accusation. He rang for Miss Bell, requesting her presence, and laid the glove before her. "Madam," he said gently, "you familiar with this maker?" Bell shook her head, brow knitted. "No, monsieur. I have never heard of Marcel Duval." Poirot raised an eyebrow. "And you, Dr. Chambers?" The physician stepped forward, peering at the glove. His eyes widened, and he reached out as though to touch it, then hesitated. I ordered gloves from Duval some weeks ago," he admitted. "My hands became irritated. Medical gloves, you see, did not suit my skin. I commissioned a pair, and they arrived yesterday." He looked at Poirot in frank surprise. "Is that extraordinary?" Poirot allowed a small smile. "Not extraordinary, doctor, useful." He produced a fingerprint kit and carefully dusted the glove's fingers. No prints emerged. The glove had been worn recently and every trace removed. "You had motive to procure these gloves," Poirot observed, "and you had opportunity to visit Savile Row. But you maintain you never visited the greenhouse." Chambers paled. "Never." Poirot inclined his head. "We shall test that claim." He dismissed Chambers and summoned Mr. Carlyle. He showed the butler the scuff mark at the greenhouse door. Carlyle frowned in recognition. "I repaired that threshold last month," he said. "The wood there is brand new." Poirot stepped to the fireplace and produced a tag torn from a pair of boots, the same distinctive tread as in the greenhouse. "These prints," he murmured, "belong to one pair only." The next morning, Poirot requested all household slippers be inspected. One pair of men's leather boots from the scullery matched the greenhouse tread perfectly, worn, scuffed, and unpolished. He questioned Carlyle, who insisted the boots belonged to a visiting tradesman servicing the greenhouse's heating system. Yet no such work had been scheduled. The gardener affirmed no engineer had arrived. Poirot pressed Carlyle on the tradesman's name. The butler could offer none. Suspicion flickered in Poirot's gaze. "Monsieur Carlyle," he said softly, "you claim loyalty to Lady Helena. Yet you arranged for a false workman to enter her greenhouse without record." Carlyle's composure cracked for an instant, but he recovered quickly. "I merely wished repairs done in secret. Lady Helena desired privacy." Poirot's moustaches twitched. "Privacy, monsieur? Or concealment?" He pulled from his pocket the glove and the boot tag. "These clues speak of collaboration, an aide-de-camp well versed in household routines. You provided the boots, and you lent us the keys. But the glove, you did not provide that." Carlyle's lip trembled. I know nothing of that glove." Poirot nodded. "Very well. We shall see." With that, he dismissed Carlyle and sat alone with the glove under the clear morning light, turning it slowly in his hands. He reflected on the other suspects, Reed's jealous pleas, Belle's vow to clear her brother's name, Chambers's hidden medical ledger. Each motive was genuine, yet each suspect denied access to the greenhouse. Only an insider, someone with keys and authority, could plan and execute intrusions so precisely. Poirot's thoughts returned to the glove's tailor, Marcel Duval. He knew of Duval's shop, a discreet atelier on Savile Row frequented by gentlemen of rank. Which of his acquaintances might possess such custom gloves? He dismissed Reed and Bell. The glove was too opulent for the maid and the penniless artist. That left Dr. Chambers and Mr. Carlyle. The glove was not of a sober butler, but if Carlyle had acquired it for a gentleman guest, an unrecorded visitor, he could have lent it for use in the greenhouse. Intrigued, Poirot fetched the gardener, Mr. Hill, and directed him to show the route from the toolshed to the main house. They followed the muddy path, past the rose arbor, and through the greenhouse door. "No one but myself and Mr. Carlyle used this entrance," Hill confirmed. Poirot eyed him. "Is there anyone you would trust with its key?" The gardener shook his head. "I only give it to Mr. Carlyle." The detective's lips curved. "Voila! We have our inner circle." Turning on his heel, Poirot strode back to the house, determined to confront the butler once and for all, with the glove of Duval acting as both bait and indictment. That evening, Poirot arranged for all staff to dine in the servants' hall, under Carlyle's watchful eye, while he and Lady Helena awaited in the drawing-room. He produced the glove and, with deliberate calm, described its discovery and its maker. Carlyle's face blanched as he realized the trap had closed. "Monsieur Carlyle," Poirot said, "you borrowed these boots and these keys to smuggle someone, or something, into the greenhouse. But you lacked the glove. You obtained it, stained with violet powder, and returned it to the scene of the crime. Why?" Carlyle rose stiffly. I only wished to protect Lady Helena," he stammered. "I feared she—" Poirot cut him off. "You feared nothing but being found out. You arranged repairs that never took place, lent the thief your keys, and attempted to divert suspicion with violet powder. Yet you did not foresee that your tidy souls would betray you." The butler sank back into his chair, head bowed. "I only did it for the estate," he murmured. Poirot's eyes softened. "But at what cost, monsieur?" "A lady's treasured Pastel, her safety, and her trust." As Carlyle's shoulders slumped in defeat, Poirot retrieved the glove and held it aloft. Marcel Duval's name is not known to all, but even less known is his client list. We shall ask the Paris Gallery for records. For tonight, however, you remain under our scrutiny." With that, Poirot placed the glove upon the mantel and departed, leaving Carlyle alone with his guilt. Outside, the wind whispered through the laurels, as though heralding the unraveling of the manor's darkest secret, and as though promising the final threads of the mystery would soon be drawn taut. Chapter 6: Shadows of Danger. Late that evening, when the manor's corridors lay hushed beneath a deep velvet darkness, Poirot sat in his study poring over the scant evidence he had amassed. The single gas lamp flickered, casting wavering shadows upon the pages of his notebook. The glove, the boot-trod tag, the scrap of pastel backing, each demanded scrutiny. He paused to smooth his cravat, eyes narrowing in contemplation, when a soft, urgent knock sounded at his door. "Monsieur, there has been an incident in the gallery," came Carlyle's hushed voice. Without a moment's hesitation, Poirot rose, donned his overcoat, and followed the butler through winding passageways. They crossed the high hall, where the portrait of Lady Helena's great-grandfather watched impassively, and descended into the room once used for private viewings. A faint lamplight revealed Thomas Reed sprawled upon the cold marble floor, his artist's smock darkened by a spreading bruise near the temple. Beside him lay a fragment of the Surat pastel, as though torn from its heart, and upon his collar a delicate smudge of violet powder. Reed's lips moved in a feeble whisper. "Monsieur, someone tried to finish what they began." His hand clutched the pastel shard as if it contained the very key to his salvation. Poirot knelt, gently lifting Reed's wrist to test for a pulse. "He lives," he announced quietly, eyeing the powder trace. With gloved care, he secured the fragment in an evidence packet and then stood, pacing the gallery floor. The protective case that once housed the pastel had vanished entirely, no lunette, no frame, leaving only the empty alcove's outline upon the wall. The window at its side stood open, its latch twisted. Dew on the sill glistened, bearing partial footprints, one boot tread the gardener would not have worn, the other far too small for Dr. Chambers's size. Turning to Carlyle, Poirot asked, "Who discovered Master Reed?" The butler pointed toward the conservatory door. "I passed by on my rounds, and heard his cry. None of the household servants were nearer." A silent footman hovered in the doorway, ashen-faced. Poirot dismissed him gently, then instructed Carlyle to ensure every exit remained under watch. "No one must leave the premises," he intoned. "The assailant is still among us." With measured calm, Poirot examined the scene. He tapped the floor near the window, showing Carlyle a faint smudge that ran toward the side door. The intruder fled this way. Then, stooping, he collected two finer clues, a single, jagged sliver of glass, clearly from the pastel's protective glazing, and a scrap of paper caught in the door's latch. The paper bore the last stroke of a hastily scrawled letter, V. Poirot pocketed both. Next, he questioned Reed, though the young artist's eyelids drooped. "Monsieur Reed," he began softly, "describe to me the moment before you fell." Reed blinked, concentrating. "I heard a whisper, no, a metallic scrape, like a tool against glass, and I turned to see a figure slipping past the window. I rose to follow them, hoping to reclaim the pastel, when I felt a blow at the back of my head." He pointed feebly to the bruise. "I managed to grab that fragment before I collapsed." Poirot nodded thoughtfully. "And could you discern anything of the figure's gait, their voice?" Reed shook his head. "Only that they moved swiftly, deliberately, and that they wore heavy boots. I saw their soles momentarily on the dew." Reed's voice caught, and he drifted into fevered slumber. Having gleaned all he could, Poirot turned his attention back to Carlyle. "Has any visitor departed today?" Any tradesman called beyond the gardener's business? Carlyle shook his head. No one but the usual staff. Poirot's brow furrowed. Yet these prints, he tapped the partial tread, do not match our gardener's clogs, nor the butler's polished shoes. They match those boots you claimed were brought in for the heating engineer, an engineer who never came. The butler's eyes flickered, but he remained silent. As the household gathered once more in uneasy silence, Poirot addressed them with calm authority. This attack upon Mr. Reed indicates that he discovered something of great value, something our assailant fears you each might learn. He held aloft the scrap of paper with the letter V. This may be the beginning of a code, or merely an initial. We shall see. He then disclosed the glass sliver, noting its clean break. The protective case was handled with skill. This is no bungled theft, it is a deliberate, methodical strike. Dr. Chambers, pale with concern, asked, Monsieur Poirot, is Mr. Reed's life in danger? Poirot inclined his head gravely. He is as secure here as I can make him, but the intent was to silence him. Whoever wields such precision tools willfully may return. Eyes turned toward Miss Bell, whose face lay hidden behind trembling hands. The maid rose, wiping tears. Monsieur, I swear I know nothing of this. Poirot studied her for a long moment before meeting Carlyle's gaze. This house is ever open to our suspect, opportunity abounds. Tonight we have witnessed the shadows deepen, and a second blow has been struck. We must consider who among you possessed the knowledge of the Pastel's hiding place, the confidence to assault a gentleman, and the nerve to leave him for dead. He paused, letting his words hang. As the assembled company exchanged nervous glances, Poirot offered them each a measure of reassurance. Do not quake in fear. Our criminal, though bold, has underestimated the resolve of my little grey cells. Dawn approaches, I shall reconvene you all then. With that, he led the household detective style back toward the main hall, each step deliberate, his mind racing. Outside, the wind sighed through the ancient oaks, as though echoing the unease within. Within Ashcroft Manor, danger had revealed its darker face, and Poirot's unrivaled acuity would now be tested as never before. The shadows had grown long, but dawn's illumination would soon expose every crafty secret. Chapter 7, A False Accusation. The dawnlight filtered through the mullioned windows of Ashcroft Manor with deceptive calm. In the grand hallway, Hercule Poirot stood before the assembled household, his posture as immaculate as his evening wear the night before. Word had spread of the assault upon Thomas Reed, and now a police constable waited discreetly behind the panelled walls. Poirot's little grey cells were in motion, weighing each face, and each unspoken fear, against the mounting evidence. Mesdames et messieurs, Poirot began, voice measured, we must address the most recent discovery, documents found concealed in Miss Clara Bell's trunk. A murmur rippled through the group. Clara Bell, her cheeks flushed like a pale rose, pressed a hand to her chest. Monsieur Poirot, I can explain, she stammered. At Poirot's signal, Constable Harris stepped forward and produced a leather-bound ledger. Discovered hidden beneath Madame Bell's garments, sir, he reported crisply. Entries here indicate payments received, substantial sums, from an unknown benefactor identified only by the initials e.g. he tapped a brass clasp. Furthermore, these notes correspond to dates when the pastel was missing. Bell's eyes widened. That ledger, it's Lady Helena's personal account book. She glanced at Lady Helena, who sat pallid in a high-backed chair. I was merely asked to safeguard it. The rest is, beyond my knowledge. Her voice quavered. Poirot nodded thoughtfully and produced a violet-stained glove, the one found in the greenhouse. This glove bears no fingerprints, but its tailor's label points to Savile Row. Miss Bell, you claimed unfamiliarity with it. Yet this ledger, this glove, and the violet powder all converge upon you. Bell brushed a tear away. Monsieur, I swear I never wore that glove. I never stooped to theft or violence. My only aim was to prove my brother's honor. Dr. Chambers interjected, voice steady, but why conceal the ledger? Why not present it to Lady Helena directly? Bell glanced at the doctor, and for a fleeting moment, her resolve faltered. I feared she would dismiss me again. I panicked. Poirot turned to Mr. Carlyle, the butler, who had supplied the glove's location. And you, monsieur, did you observe Miss Bell last night? Were you present when the ledger disappeared from Lady Helena's study? Carlyle swallowed. I saw her pass the library at an unusual hour, sir. His tone was neutral, but Poirot detected a subtle hesitation. Constable Harris, called upon to act, approached Bell. Miss Bell, I must place you under arrest for suspicion of theft and attempted murder. As the maid's wrists were gently clasped, she sobbed, Monsieur Poirot, you must believe me, it was not I. A hush fell. Lady Helena rose painfully to her feet. Clara, how could this be, she whispered, grief and betrayal in her eyes. Bell's sobs echoed down the corridor as she was led away. Poirot remained in the hall, cane in hand, gaze distant. Once the door closed, he allowed himself but a single exhalation. In his mind raced the inconsistencies, the ledger's placement in Bell's trunk, far too obvious if she meant to conceal it. The glove's label, too refined for a maid, the powder's uniformity, crafted by a chemist, not an amateur. Yet the papers had been paid for, the glove had been planted, and the ledger bore her prints. Dr. Chambers approached softly. You are certain, Poirot? Clara must be innocent. Poirot inclined his head gravely. Constable Harris will conduct his duties, but my conviction lies elsewhere. We have constructed a façade of guilt around poor Miss Bell, one so perfect that even I was tempted to believe it. And therein lies the danger of a false accusation. As the household dispersed, some to attend to Reed, others to comfort Lady Helena, Poirot sought solitude in the drawing-room. His eyes fell upon the empty easel, its outline still faint on the wall. The pastel remained lost, its hidden compartment unplundered by Bell, unless she had been a diversion. He lifted the fragment of scrawled V from his pocket and turned it about in his fingertips. V for Vendredi, for Violet, for villain, but not for Bell. A soft knock announced Carlyle's return. The butler entered, face drawn. Monsieur, the gentleman from Duval's shop has confirmed an order for a pair of gloves, delivered only yesterday. The purchaser was Dr. Edmund Chambers. Poirot's eyes sharpened. So the gloves were procured for you, Doctor. And yet Miss Bell is accused. Chambers ran a hand through his hair. Poirot, I admit I commissioned the gloves for my dermatitis. I did not think it unusual to enter the greenhouse to inspect my plants, especially if I lacked my usual surgical gloves. But I did not remove any ledger, nor did I dose my mistress with powder. Poirot studied him, noting the man's drawn expression and the steady tremor of his hands. You possess motive, medical license at risk, and knowledge of poisons. You have means, and you have opportunity, your rounds carried you near the gallery late at night. Yet you confess no violence. The butler lingered in the doorway as Poirot rose. Monsieur, may I suggest that justice delayed is justice denied? Miss Bell is innocent, yet she suffers the weight of your swift judgment. Poirot placed a steady hand upon Carlyle's shoulder. Be patient, monsieur. The final threads have yet to be drawn. Tomorrow, I shall present the true pattern of deception. That night, as the wind rattled the window panes and the manor's shadows deepened, Poirot sat by the hearth, his silhouette outlined by the dying embers. He had orchestrated the arrest of an innocent woman, not through error, but by design, to draw out the true perpetrator. For in every false accusation lies the faint echo of the true culprit's relief, and Poirot's little grey cells were listening intently for that reaction. The game was not concluded, it had only taken its most dramatic turn. Chapter 8, Poirot's masterful reveal. That evening, the household of Ashcroft Manor assembled once more in the drawing-room, the air taut with anticipation. Lady Helena, still pale but fully recovered, sat in her usual place upon the ivory chaise longue. To her left, Thomas Reed reclined in a chair, his brow bound and spirits brightening at the sight of friends restored. Dr. Edmund Chambers stood by the hearth, fingers drumming nervously upon his medical bag. Miss Clara Bell, exonerated and trembling with relief, hovered near Lady Helena's side. At the far end of the room, Mr. Carlyle, the butler, maintained his customary stoicism, though his eyes darted like a cornered bird's. Monsieur Poirot, resplendent in evening dress, rose and swept a hand toward the empty easel and the silent hearth. Mesdames et messieurs, he began, voice rich with satisfaction, we have endured a most extraordinary series of events, the mysterious collapse of Lady Helena, the disappearance of the Sieur Pastel, the assault upon Master Reed, and the unjust accusation of our dear Miss Bell. He paused, allowing the weight of those memories to settle. Tonight, the truth emerges. He stepped to the mantel and lifted the violet-stained glove upon which so many suspicions had rested. This glove, he announced, bore the name of Marcel Duval, tailor to the gentleman of Savile Row. Yet its true owner was not a member of the Ashcroft household, but Poirot turned slowly toward Dr. Chambers, whose dark eyes widened in momentary relief. A faint gasp passed through the room. Poirot continued, Monsieur Edmund Chambers, you ordered these gloves to alleviate your skin's irritation, and they were delivered only the day before the unveiling. Chambers swallowed. I admit I commissioned them, yes, he began uncertainly. Yet, said Poirot, you were careful to leave no fingerprints, no trace that you entered the greenhouse or handled the pastel's frame, except for the violet powder, intended to mimic lavender but, in fact, containing atropine alkaloids. He held up the small vial. You administered a mild dose in Lady Helena's afternoon tea, knowing it would render her unconscious without lasting harm. A hush fell as Helena's eyes filled with shock. Your motive, Poirot went on, was not art, but devotion. You discovered that confidential documents, evidence of Lady Helena's intervention in matters of family reputation, were concealed behind the pastel. Fearing the scandal would destroy the Ashcroft name and your own standing as her physician, you resolved to remove those papers. To do so, you engineered her collapse, slipped into the greenhouse under cover of darkness, and retrieved the pastel. Dr. Chambers's shoulders sagged. I only wished to protect her reputation, her life's work, he whispered. Precisely, said Poirot. But your plan required secrecy. You enlisted Mr. Carlyle unwittingly, by arranging for a fictitious tradesman to enter the greenhouse and provide you with suitable boots. You borrowed your own new gloves, to avoid staining your surgical gloves, and left but a single clue, the violet powder. Poirot gestured toward the boot trod tag displayed earlier. These prints match Mr. Carlyle's and Genesa boots, he explained, though he, too, was deceived. Carlyle's face betrayed both relief at the unveiling and shame at his complicity. You believed you were serving your mistress, Poirot continued, yet you became the tool of your own deception. A murmur ran through the room as the trainer of the Palace of Subterfuge crumbled. Poirot held up the fractured shard of pastel's glazing. When Master Reed stumbled upon the empty frame, you attacked him in the gallery, striking him with a metal implement to prevent his discovery of the hidden compartment. Reed, flushed with recovering health, nodded feebly. "I saw nothing but a figure in dark boots," he murmured. "And the ledger found in Miss Bell's trunk?" asked Helena, voice trembling. Poirot smiled gently. "A red herring of your own doctor's devising." He planted it there to shift suspicion onto Miss Bell, knowing her motive to clear her brother's name would seem most plausible. Clara Bell sank slowly into her chair, clasping Helena's hand. I never touched those papers," she breathed. Lady Helena turned to Dr. Chambers, sorrow and gratitude mingling in her eyes. "You have betrayed my trust, Edmund." Chambers bowed his head. "Forgive me, milady. My fear for your legacy, yours and this family's, clouded my judgment." Poirot laid down the evidence upon a small side table. "Miss Amis, we see that passion, however well-intentioned, can warp the greatest minds. Dr. Chambers, you will face the consequences of your actions, but I trust Lady Helena's clemency will weigh the circumstances of your devotion." As two constables stepped forward to take Dr. Chambers into custody, Helena rose and placed a gentle hand on his arm. "Your loyalty saved my name," she said. "Yet you must serve the law you once upheld." Turning to the assembled group, she continued more brightly, "And now, my pastel has been recovered from the gardener's tool shed, hidden beneath sacks of peat. Monsieur Poirot, your brilliance has restored not only an artwork but also our peace of mind and our sense of justice." Poirot inclined his head, moustaches quivering with pleasure. "It is ever my aim, madam, to bring light where shadows fall." He turned to Reed. "And you, mon cher, shall receive my recommendation. Your talent deserves the finest patronage, untainted by scandal." Reed lifted Helena's Surat pastel from its quiet hiding place and examined its luminous dots with renewed wonder. In the flickering lamplight, Poirot surveyed the relieved faces of his friends. "Let us remember," he said softly, "that the smallest clue, the faintest powder, the tiniest footprint, can unravel the most elaborate deceit. And that the heart, whether malice-driven or devotion-driven, may lead us astray." With that, he produced his cane, tapped it lightly upon the parquet, and added with a flourish, "Voila, the mystery is solved." Amid relieved laughter and soft applause, Poirot allowed himself a gracious bow. Outside, the ivy rustled in the gentle summer breeze, as though echoing the harmonious resolution within Ashcroft Manor. And thus, with all loose ends deftly tied, Hercule Poirot once more demonstrated the invincible power of his little grey cells.